Hello, everyone, and welcome to our open Q&A with Dr. Ethan Russo. Our webinar today is really intended as a fundraiser to support the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize, which goes to support researchers in the area of phytocannabinoids that is translational to medicine. It's really applied medical research. And research is so important to everything that we do in cannabis science. I'm sure all of you have had the experience when you're advocating for cannabis legalization or talking to someone about cannabis in general. People will say, oh, well, there isn't enough research. We need more evidence. Well, in part, that is true that we need more research, but we certainly don't need more research to know that cannabis is a safe and efficacious medicine. What we need more research in is to better understand it, how it works in the human body, and how we can use it as a therapeutic agent to treat and potentially reverse disease progression. And so that's what we're really here today to talk about, is the importance of cannabis research and to raise funds for the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize. To get us started, I'd like to invite several of our donors to the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize to talk a little bit about why they chose to contribute and how they utilize cannabis science in their business. And so first, I'd like to invite Dr. Bilibabkich to tell us a little bit about her business. She is a Canadian family medicine physician, got her start in emergency medicine, and she is the founder of RxLeaf, which is a business that Credo Science, Dr. Ethan Russo and myself are working with, based in Thailand. We're really excited about the work that we're doing with them because it has the potential to generate an incredible amount of clinical evidence in support of a wide variety of compounds from the cannabis plant. So, Dr. Mara, thank you. I'd like to turn it over to you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm honored to be here. I've been a physician now for approximately 27 years. When it comes to cannabis, I did my own personal research, and I also did a lot of extensive training. I have a chemistry background, so I understood that the nature of the science confirmed how credible the plant was to treat a multitude of symptoms. I personally have treated about 8,000 patients in my practice with great success. I think the patients hopefully would agree. Success defined by improving quality of life, reducing opioid use and other pharmaceutical use that was not providing adequate or effective treatment. From here, I went and built a business called RxLeaf. We are doing trials and have a partnership with Credo Science with respect to doing cannabis trials on medical conditions that most of the world suffers from. These include, but are not inclusive to, things like anxiety, insomnia, pain, topical skin conditions. We are completely honored that we have a partnership with one of the most respected clinical cannabis researchers in the world, Dr. Russo. And in Asia, we have the government support, we have the hospital support, we have the patient support, and we have the means to be able to carry out these trials in a timely manner, I'm hoping this year. With the success of the trials, which I have no doubt because the research is there, Dr. Russo has provided us formulations for these medical conditions based on the science, the data, and his own personal research. We are hoping for an FDA type approval for these, which would allow us then to provide these and export these finished products, mostly to Asia, which will include Japan as our partner, Europe, predominantly Germany, and it will be over the counter. Why this is important is because it will allow access to everybody that suffers from these conditions without having barriers to access that we have sometimes even in Canada. These would include needing a prescription from a doctor that you cannot see in a timely manner and so forth. So we are very excited that it's an option for people to pursue. I think what I see both in experience clinically and my travels, and especially in Asia, is there is a growing need for people to want to veer away from pharmaceuticals and opt for more traditional plant type medications to help with their medical conditions. I think it's very important in this respect that the support of the cannabis research makes it a more widely accepted, proven and efficacious medical treatment moving forward. So our company in Asia, RxLeaf, is very proud in this matter to support cannabis research.
Thank you, Dr. Mara. So we just had a whole bunch of people join. Want to take a moment to welcome you and let you all know that at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A icon. So if you have questions that you want to throw out, that's the place to do it, not the chat. Our assistant, Julie Ermish, is going to be dropping URLs in the chat throughout the webinar that you might want to go check out at some point. Hopefully you'll save them all before the recording is over. But I'd like to turn it over to Todd Harrison. Todd is one of our largest contributors to the scholarship fund. He is the founder of CB1 Capital, which is a venture capital fund that specializes in investing in public cannabis companies. He's a pioneer in this area. And Todd, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. This is an honor to be included with this rotation. Ethan is, Dr. Russo is really an inspiration and was one of the first people we contacted when we founded CB1 Capital. My background's in finance, and I came to really explore the history and the science following 9/11 and struggling with PTSD after that, working with Dr. Julie Holland, who I know is a big fan of Dr. Russo's as well. And that really opened the door when I met my partner, and he was studying the science after helping to solve for his own seizure disorder condition. We started to think through the notion of the efficacious agility of this plant. We started to find people who we thought were super knowledgeable about it. And Dr. Russo was, if not the first, one of the first people we reached out to. And it's been just a sponge of information for us to absorb. And just, I think we're just scratching the surface here, given the history and the war on drugs and the impediments to research. So we all continue to learn, and certainly humbled and thankful to be here as part of this. And for anybody who is interested in this or has been touched by the plant, this is most certainly a wonderful cause to support, and we're thankful and honored to be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. So up next is Akeem Gardner from Canada. Akeem is the founder and CEO of Canurta, and he is an attorney by trade who then became a hemp farmer and now is an entrepreneur. We have the good fortune of getting to work with Akeem in his polyphenols business. And this is a company that I would encourage all of you to be on the lookout for. So Akeem, thank you so much for your sponsorship of the Ethan Russo Trainee Fund. And I'd like to turn it over to you to say a few words about why you chose to support this fund and how you utilize cannabis science in your business. Akeem?
Akeem, you're muted and we need to see you and hear you.
Oh, we just lost Akeem. All right, well, while we wait for him to come back on, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've raised so far. So to date, we have generated almost $7,000. If every single person who registered for the webinar as of this morning, that was 199 people, were to have contributed $5, we would have been able to have generated $995 today. Had everyone contributed $15, we would have generated $2,985. And if everyone gave the requested $25 today, we would have generated $4,975. Currently, the recipient of the scholarship receives a $200 cash prize. And right now we are petitioning the organization who is managing the scholarship to increase that to $1,000 cash prize. And so I'd like to ask all of you to take a moment. If you haven't given, whatever it is you feel comfortable giving, I'd ask you to do so now. Every single dollar helps, whether that's 1, 10, 100, or 1,000. So it looks like Akeem is now online. And Akeem, if you could tell us why you chose to support the scholarship and how you utilize peer-reviewed science in your business.
Awesome. Everyone, super sorry for running 2 minutes late. I was just trying to run into my office to get here before Todd finished. I'm Akeem Gardner, and I'm a CEO of Canurta Inc. We are a Canadian-based biotechnology company exploring novel molecules in the cannabis and hemp plant that we believe are going to be extremely important in the fight against chronic and complex disease. And we're super fortunate and grateful to be working with Ethan and Nisha on this journey, learning about all the different research that has previously been done with the plant on all the botanical ingredients that are there, and specifically involving our molecules of interest, the canflavins A and B. A lot of our research done today is founded on some of the peer-reviewed work that was done in academia and the clinical research, the anecdotal research that showed that cannabis had therapeutic effects on a variety of complex chronic diseases. And it's our mission to be able to move this forward and to inspire others to be able to dig into the plant, some of the more novel molecules that are there, and come up with a variety of different solutions as to how they can help human and animal health. So that's why we decided to sponsor this scholarship, because we believe that anyone can add to this mission, anyone can help prepare us for a better tomorrow. And we want to support this mission alongside Credo Science, Dr. Russo, and yourself, Nisha. And I'm extremely excited to be here today on this journey and be part of this panel. So thank you very much. And that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Akeem. So let's see. Canurta, CB1 Capital, RxLeaf, and Plant and Planet were our 4 corporate foundational sponsors. And Dr. Dale Hunt of Plant and Planet was not able to join us today, but I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge that he was the first person to support the scholarship and did so enthusiastically. Dr. Hunt is our IP attorney. He has a PhD in plant molecular biology. He is also as I said, an IP attorney, having submitted over 1,000 patents in 30 different countries. And their work at Plant and Planet Law Firm basically uses research science every day to support the IP that they are generating for their clients. So huge shout out to Plant and Planet Law Firm. And then also, just to backtrack a little bit, you know, this idea for the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize came about last year when Ethan was turning 70. It's like, what do you get the person who has everything that they want? Well, you honor them and get them a scholarship named in their honor. I think we all agree that there's probably a few people in the space who have done as much as Ethan has done to help educate us all about the plant and how components of the cannabis plant work in the human body. And so I think we all agree we have a huge debt of gratitude to him. And it's also incredibly fitting that a couple of weeks ago, we had the passing of Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, who was Ethan's mentor. And we all agree that Dr. Mechoulam has done incredible things to advance cannabis science. And frankly, you know, he's the one who got this all started. And so Ethan, if you would take it away and just tell us a little bit about Dr. Mechoulam's contribution to cannabis science.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen.
All right, thank you.
All right, I just need to get the slideshow started. So it was 3 weeks ago today that we lost Professor Mechoulam at the age of 92. So as Nisha mentioned, I'd like to just say a little bit about his work, and then touch on some areas of importance yet to come in the cannabinoid sphere. Then we'll open it up for questions. So Professor Meshulam was born to a Sephardic Jewish family in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1930. He had what he described as a pretty idyllic childhood for a time, but World War II was beginning, and Bulgaria was quickly occupied by the Nazis. His father was a physician, spent some time in a concentration camp, but was let out when it burnt down. And he had saved a bunch of people, and they decided maybe they should let him go. But then Bulgaria became a communist country, and in 1949, the family emigrated to the new nation of Israel. Subsequently, he went on to get his PhD, and he was a phytochemist studying the chemistry of plants. He studied cannabis because it remained a mystery. In the 19th century, the active ingredients of the opium poppy, the opioids, morphine, codeine, et cetera, were identified. Also cocaine from coca leaves, but they had a great deal of trouble dealing with cannabis. Most of the substances in it had not been identified. So in 1963, began work on it using hashish that had been seized by the government. And this was from Lebanon. It was chucked over a fence, and presumably some money exchanged hands. And with this gent that I was pleased to meet in 2010, Yehiel Gaoni, they proceeded to identify THC definitively in 1964, along with a bunch of others. And just to show, the prior year, Meshulam and Shvo had figured out the three-dimensional structure of cannabidiol. But in 64, THC was nailed down, also cannabigerol, and subsequently cannabichromene and many others, including the acid cannabinoids. From Weizmann Institute, he went on to a distinguished career in teaching and research at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and spent a time as the rector of that institution. But, you know, in the 60s, he did enough work that he'd always be remembered, but it never stopped there. And he proceeded over the 6 decades to continue to contribute scientifically. In 1992, in conjunction with Lumir Hanush and William Devane, who is no longer with us, they identified the first endocannabinoid, anandamide, and subsequently in 1994, they identified the second, 2-arachidonoglycerol, or 2-AG. And here we see that there are different structures from THC, but anandamide especially acts analogously to THC at the CB1 and CB2 receptors. Subsequently in 1998 and again in 1999 with Professor Shimon Ben Shabbat, we had the first descriptions of the entourage effect, the idea that molecules related to anandamide and 2-AG that seemingly were less active or inactive on their own contributed to the therapeutic effect. In 99, they extended this to say that some plants were better medicines than single compounds. And certainly that's something I've tried to run with in subsequent investigation in my career in cannabinoid research. I first met Professor Meshulam in Acapulco at the International Cannabinoid Research Society in 1999. Here he is with late Billy Martin and with Roger Pertwee, who I'm glad to say is still with us and still working. This is a fuzzy picture because it was very steamy in Acapulco. One of the memories I have of Rafi that I'm most proud of is that his last book was this one, Cannabinoids as Therapeutics, in 2005, and he asked me to write the first chapter. He wanted a history chapter and thought a good subject would be cannabis in India. Fortunately, I had amassed a great deal of information in the prior 9 years about the history, and I'm very pleased with that result. Some pictures together. This is my idea of a joke. I like to say that Professor Meshulam discovered THC in 1964. I discovered THC in 1970. Certainly the circumstances were quite different. And altogether, I tallied it up. We were together working or at conferences in 14 different countries. This one was in 2009 in London. And I particularly remember this one because he tried to introduce me to Jörg Gerich, who I already knew. So he introduced me and then said, he has many crazy ideas, which in my life is one of the greatest compliments I've ever had. So again, you see a little bit older in some of these pictures. Rafi never stopped working till the end, even when he was very ill. And he also, as a chemist, was interested in doing things to the molecules in the plant to create different effects. And here are just a few examples. HU stands for Hebrew University. HU210 was a very important high potency agonist at the CB1 receptor that was used experimentally. This was not designed to be used clinically, but it is related to some of the synthetic cannabinoids that we now find in the illicit market, like in K2 and spice. But he knew that by making this a 7-carbon side chain with 2 methyl groups, that it would be more potent and last longer. Its mirror image was HU211, which was developed as a drug called dexanabinol for traumatic brain injury. But after the rights were acquired, the company that was doing it never checked with him again. They decided that they would give 1 dose intravenously, and while it worked in initial studies, in the phase 3 studies, it did not work. Might it have worked if it were used repeatedly? We may never know at this point. Rafi was always very interested in the CB2 receptor, the non-psychoactive receptor, and its role as a protector from non-infectious insults. So he created this HU308, which continues to be tested as a possible pharmaceutical. And then 2018, he was still at it. He knew that cannabidiolic acid, CBDA, what you have in fresh hemp before decarboxylation to cannabidiol, was unstable. So he made a methyl ester out of that to make it shelf stable, and it would be a prodrug and turn into CBDA in the body. However, he didn't stay in his lane. He was a bench chemist, but he contributed clinically in great ways. With the Brazilians, Cunha and Carlini, they did a study in 9 patients of cannabidiol as an effective anticonvulsant in 1980, and he always decried the fact that it took 30 years for this gauntlet to be taken up again. And now in the US, in some other countries, cannabidiol as Epidiolex is available as an anticonvulsant at a great price. As mentioned, he looked at cannabinoids to reduce brain injury, the dexanabinol work. He was part of the team in Jerusalem that looked at delta-8 THC as chemotherapy for nausea and vomiting in children, which was uniformly successful and without a lot of psychoactive side effects. He continued to work with the late Itai Bob, looking at the endocannabinoid system for prevention of osteoporosis. And as mentioned before, was interested in CB2 as a protective agent. And then they also did a very prominent study showing cannabidiol as an effective treatment for graft versus host disease in transplant patients without the side effects of cyclosporin and related drugs. I'll close this section with a picture. This was taken at Rafi's 80th birthday in Jerusalem, and here with the discoverers of THC. So we'll close this tribute to Rafi and talk a little bit about cannabis holes and opportunities with the
Can I
science.
interrupt you for just a second? Ethan? So guys, in the chat, Julie is going to provide you a URL for a wonderful interview that Ethan did with Shingolos on Shaping Fire podcast. So I encourage you guys to check that out. It takes a much deeper dive into the work of Raphael Meshulam. Thank you. Go ahead, Ethan.
Sure. So one of the areas where cannabis has been used traditionally is obstetrics and gynecology. When we look at the 19th century, when so-called Indian hemp came to Europe from India, it was very prominently used in obstetrics and gynecology. But today, that's not the case, and it remains a forbidden area due to unfounded fears of what it might do. But here you just see a listing of all the conditions in which cannabis had been used in the past with great success in treating these various conditions. And I have endometriosis last and biggest because this remains a tremendous public health problem for women who are affected by it. And conventional medicine has done an extremely poor job in treating it. Various aspects of the endocannabinoid system enter into why it may be helpful, and we certainly need more work there. Last year at CanMed, I gave a lecture about cannabis and psychiatry, which I called The Final Frontier. And this is just a listing of different components of cannabis and how they might be applied to psychiatric conditions. Now, this is based on a paper that came out in 2018, but I've gotten read cannabigerol, which, based on studies to date, seems to have tremendous value here, particularly as a non-sedating, non-addictive treatment for anxiety. And we're using it extensively in our formulation work. Cancer remains a big target, and there are two ways to look at. First, primary effects on the tumors itself. We know that the various cannabinoids promote apoptosis, so this reinitiation of programmed cell death in tumors that are otherwise immortalized. It inhibits angiogenesis. Cancers create their own blood supply, and inhibition of metastases. So these are all effects that that cannabinoids possess. There are also secondary effects on symptoms of cancer, benefits on nausea, mood, getting the blood cells going again, benefits on pain and opioid sparing. Sorry, I need to go back. And these are approaches that Andera Pharmaceuticals are pursuing, targeting tumors selectively with cannabinoids via lipid nanoparticles. And they're also doing cannabinoid-based antibiotics. Matrix 3 is a combination that produces triple synergy, combining cannabigerol and cannabichromine with silver. That's a component of a lot of topical treatments. This has shown efficacy against methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, against vancomycin-resistant Enterococcus, and contrary to what was previously thought to be the case with cannabinoids being only effective on gram-positive organisms, this agent proved efficacious against Pseudomonas and other gram-negative infections. This is unpublished data, but is going through the process now. And again, we have a link to Andera. These are the 12 phytocannabinoids from the plant about which we know some of the pharmacology. There are at least 138 others where we don't have that information. But certainly the work that we're trying to do with Breeders Best to identify novel cannabinoids, we hope that we'll be adding to the list. But beyond the phytocannabinoids, there are other agents. We heard from Akeem at Canurta, and he's been interested in canflavin, something that was of interest to us as well. I first wrote about this in 2001. So this is a flavone in cannabis from the aerial parts. And work has shown that it's a powerful anti-inflammatory that exerts its activity without being a COX inhibitor. So it would not have the drawbacks of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories that as side effects can produce gastritis, gastrointestinal bleeding, heart attacks, and strokes. So it's turning out that it's not just an anti-inflammatory. Work to date has shown great promise for cancer, even neurodegenerative diseases. And this is work that we hope to be pursuing with Canurta, both in terms of sprouted hemp seed foods, supplements, and pharmaceuticals. Work that we published, I guess it was last year or maybe the year before, on a process we call cryokeef. We just got a trademark on this. And what it is exposing fresh cannabis to dry ice and making the trichomes very brittle so that they can be knocked off. And this is without any drying or curing, which can lose up to 50% of the content of particularly of monoterpenoids. And we see a comparison here of the very clean cryokeef on the left compared to the process making keef trichomes after drying. So this is something we're working on. The benefit here is there's no chlorophyll, extraneous lipid components, and we believe that cryokeef would be a better feedstock for pharmaceutical development with cannabis-based products. And I guess that's it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope we've left enough time for questions.
Excellent, Ethan. Thank you so much. We have 111 people viewing the webinar. Thank you all for being here. I just want to remind everybody that we have a pretty robust chat going. Lots of information there for you to scoop up, including the donation link to the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize. And just think, if everybody that was on the line right now were to contribute, let's just call it $15, we would have $1,680 towards the scholarship. Would like to thank a couple of friends for being on. So I see Rachel Knox is in the chat, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. Super happy you guys are here. And I'd like that first question to be Dr. Goldstein's question, which she's asking if you can address the recent media frenzy reporting that cannabis causes cardiac issues. Will you give your medical opinion of the risk versus benefits based on the research so far?
Okay, well, most of the problem would, to the extent that there is any, would relate to smoking. I've seen the more recent studies. First of all, I don't recommend smoking as a way of using cannabis, particularly for medical purposes. However, there's been much more extensive work done in the past epidemiologically that fails to show a significant role for cannabis in producing heart attacks, strokes, or other problems. there have been some studies that show a slight increased risk in myocardial infarction in an hour after smoking. And this probably relates to tachycardia associated with the high. But again, in looking at more in-depth epidemiological data, it's not possible to draw the inference that cannabis is a big contributor to heart attacks. Again, I don't recommend smoking. Vaporization is better. For medical applications, we prefer a longer, slower contour of effect that comes from oromucosal administration, tinctures, oils, things of this sort.
Next question, does CBD slow down the function of the liver and does it suppress the production of bile? What about THC? And do or can cannabinoids make the liver store more vitamin A or copper in it by that same mechanism?
Yeah, not aware of anything on that last bit, and I'm not aware of, there can be some enterohepatic circulation of the cannabinoids. The only place that I've seen that happen clinically is with Marinol, the synthetic THC. People who took it would say that it was slow to come on. It came on too strong. Then they'd feel all right. And all of a sudden they'd have a rush of being high again. And that could relate to coming out of the liver. And being absorbed again. But, you know, to generalize, some years ago, I took a deep dive on cannabinoids and hepatic function. This was for a talk for a transplant program. You know, there've been concerns in the past that THC would contribute to hepatic fibrosis. That hasn't borne out epidemiologically, and certainly other components, particularly CBD, caryophyllene, are helpful to the liver. So bottom line is there is not a reason that people should come off of transplant eligibility lists because of cannabis usage.
Thank you. How do you feel about the medical program for cannabis versus the recreational program? And also, do you feel that the education of bud tenders are just as important as training pharmacists, because we get the same questions asked all the time?
Right. Yeah, I think there needs to be much better education for bud tenders. My son was a bud tender and some years ago was runner-up, voted best bud tender in Seattle. He got very frustrated in that everybody came in asking for the highest potency THC. He would try to spend time disabusing them of the notion that that's what they wanted. It should be more about the experience and how someone's going to use it. And that can dictate what profile of cannabinoids and terpenoids the person might benefit from. Also, maybe Julie could put this in the chat. At ethanrusso.org at the library tab, I think at the top is an article with Adi Poe and Jeremy et al. And this was based on the Cult Classic in Portland and what preferences were for different profiles of cannabis. Bottom line was, THC didn't seem to be what caused the particular enjoyment of a particular chemovar. Rather, it had to do more with the aroma. And, you know, that's most often going to be mediated by the terpenoids with some contribution of fruity esters. So it's a much more complex thing than that. And certainly education has a big role in directing people towards something that's going to be more therapeutic or more enjoyable, as the case may be.
Thank you. So our next participant says it must be frustrating to experience the lack of enthusiasm by the healthcare sector concerning the endocannabinoid system and phytocannabinoids' importance in maintaining optimal health. When will standard physiological textbooks include the ECS and its constituents as required reading in American medical schools?
I'm still waiting. There's an expression translated from Yiddish that goes along the lines of "I should live so long," with accent. Yeah, it's been a constant source of frustration to me. There was a survey done some years ago, and it's still the case that a tiny minority of medical schools devote any time in the curriculum, not just to cannabis, but the endocannabinoid system. Forget cannabis for a minute. Let's understand that the endocannabinoid system is the major homeostatic regulator of human physiology. So it has a role in everything. You might think that was important enough to teach. However, what we've heard from medical school deans is something along the lines of, we have a packed curriculum now. What do you want us to take out so that we can devote time to this? Which is an excuse, but it doesn't seem to be a very compelling one.
Thank you. This is a really interesting question. Certain terpenes or aldehydes, like citrus terpenes, which have citraldehyde in them, slow down or alter the function of the liver. That's question number one. And in relation to that, what is it about terpenes like terpinolene and limonene that make people get energetic or potentially anxious? Second question, like what is the mechanism at play in humans that make us feel a certain way when certain smells are present?
Sure. Well, there's some 200 terpenoids that have been found in cannabis, so each has a story of its own. I'm really not aware of any of the terpene aldehydes having any significant representation in cannabis. So in terms of risk to the liver, we can't blame that. With terpinolene, and certainly with alpha-pinene, this innervating effect is directly related to inhibition of acetylcholinesterase. So acetylcholine is the memory molecule in the brain. If you are inhibiting its breakdown, it means there's more of it, and that's going to counteract the short-term memory impairment that THC produces. And particularly with terpinolene, it's going to create a buzz. So, it's a regional thing. Terpinolene is like in everything that's available in California. And it seems like people in California like a buzz. But again, there's a different story for every terpenoid. And just to pick on one other, linalool works through various mechanisms as an anti-anxiety agent. But again, at the library tab, I've written plenty about this, Taming THC, or the book chapter that we did with a funny title, The Usual Suspects, and a few, what was it? Yeah, anyway, The Usual Suspects.
Thank you. So are there significant differences in response to cannabis treatment between males and females in humans? It appears that rat studies suggest a difference in the treatment of pain.
Yeah, this is a good one to do either through PubMed or Semantic Scholar. Yeah, there have been salient differences, and particularly in pain. However, in the clinical studies that I did while I was at GW Pharmaceuticals, we did not see a lot of differences with Sativex in particular, in terms of efficacy rates in treating different kinds of pain, whether it be neuropathic pain, cancer pain, et cetera. So it's a definite effect. In general, women are happier in adult use of cannabis with lower amounts than the guys. I'm going to have to refer you to the literature for more detail.
All right, excellent, thank you. This person says, it remains a mystery to me, they're a general practitioner, and prescribe a variety of cannabis products, whatever they have available around that's safe. When I use olive oil macerates, most of the time, 1 milligram per milliliter, I find clinical response with doses I'd assume were, air quote, too low in comparison with the literature doses, which are based in the isolates, even when compared with QWET formulations. Do you have a similar experience?
Olive oil is a good method of extracting cannabis, and its absorption may be a lot better than some other agents. MCT oil is very popular. It's probably a little more shelf stable than olive oil. But in terms of the first part of the comment and question, yes, THC can be extremely effective at very low doses, even doses, it's certainly doses lower than typically have been used with Marinol synthetic THC. We need to assume that there are other components in there. I think THC alone is a lousy drug. I've said this for years. I used it extensively in my practice between 1999 and 2003, and most people couldn't tolerate it. And there were very few where it really did the job properly as compared to cannabis. THC needs other stuff aboard to make it a better drug. That's why I named Taming THC. But yes, I think that there's been an overemphasis on THC to the exclusion of other components. And I'm a big proponent of low dosing or even microdosing.
Can you talk a little bit about the current understanding of the entourage effect with other plant medicines, and if or how that might be unique with cannabis?
Well, it isn't unique. I think it's probably the best example. But yeah, one example would be the whole idea of traditional Chinese medicine. Typically, they don't use simples. Simple means one herb. In contrast, in TCM, there often are multiple combinations, and it could be that there are 2 or 3 components to treat the pain. And then there are 2 or 3 components to treat the side effects of the first 3 and a couple for taste, or to make it more palatable. I like to say that cannabis is like traditional Chinese medicine in one plant. But to give another concrete example, couple, ginkgo biloba. When you ask a phytochemist what is the active ingredient in ginkgo biloba, they'll say that there are 3 classes of compounds that seem to contribute. Some time ago in France, they had isolated one compound and used it to treat toxic shock, but they found that the extract worked a lot better. Another example would be Hypericum perforatum, St. John's wort. One of the candidates for being the active agent in its effect on depression is something called hyperforin. But hyperforin is totally unstable. When it's isolated, it has to be put under liquid nitrogen or it instantly breaks down. However, when you make a tincture of St. John's wort, there's hyperforin in it. So the plant is acting as its own preservative. So again, that's an example of entourage that's a little bit different.
Great. We have a question from somebody who is finishing the program, their cannabis science master's program at Baltimore, Maryland. And apparently you recently gave a great presentation to them. And this person thanks you. She says, as we exit these studies and are inspired to support research, how would you advise our grad school graduate cohorts who want to enter this research space to position our interest in education to work with credible researchers?
Well, it's a tough one. I mean, the more you read, the more you'll be inspired and find people that share your interests. But it's going to take hard work. I think Todd would tell you that the industry's had a tough time of it lately. The state of California is doing its best to strangle any industry. But there are so many things yet to do. As I mentioned, we know something of the pharmacology of 12 of the phytocannabinoids, and there are 138 yet to come. So I'd like to see more people working on the so-called minor cannabinoids or new cannabinoid discovery. And certainly that's something we're trying to do as well.
The next person states, it's my impression that since your landmark article, Taming THC, relatively little research is being done on cannabis chemovars that try to understand and delineate medical benefits of cannabinoids together with terpenes and flavonoids, i.e. the entourage effect. There are only a handful of serious articles that are circulating. Most of what I read focuses on single cannabinoids and not the whole plant cannabis and how to use this for disease-specific treatment. If you agree with this, why is the medical research so limited?
Money. So, I mean, this is the exact reason that Nisha started the award. Let me emphasize, it wasn't my idea. I'm sure she realizes I would have really, if she had suggested it before it was instituted, I would have poo-pooed it.
He would have gone kicking and screaming, which is why he didn't know anything about it.
Right, but I am very pleased nevertheless. But quite seriously, it's a matter of money. You know, a lot of the studies about whether there's an entourage effect or not have looked at terpenoids and whether they were active at cannabinoid receptors. What we know one is beta-caryophyllene, but we knew a long time ago with the work that Jörg Gertsch did in Switzerland that that's not how they work. They work through other activities, you know, and other neurotransmitter systems. That doesn't mean there's no entourage. And it just doesn't have to be effects on the cannabinoid receptors. We're talking about complex pharmacology, and that's another reason that people are not comfortable with it. Although for most of human history, plants were medicine, for the last 75 years, synthetic chemistry has been what the pharma industry is interested in. And it's better for them for a couple of reasons. You're dealing with one compound. Maybe there's only one mechanism of action. That's rarely true. They're always off-target effects. To them, cannabis and plants are dirty. What's more, because they can't patent something that nature made rather than them, they can't establish a proper intellectual property position, or they think so. But there are ways around it. You can have use patents. You can have patents on the mode of administration or the preparation if it is distinct. Again, I think that a lot of people avoid it, but not for the right reasons.
All right, Dr. Mechoulam was working on the acidic precursors before his passing. What role do you see these precursors playing in the future?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one because back in the 70s, when this was first, or 60s and 70s, when this was first examined, these were labeled as inactive. What they really meant was they didn't have the sex appeal of THC as a psychoactive. But we know a lot more now. THCA works on on tumor necrosis factor alpha. It's extremely important in a variety of autoimmune diseases. It also works on PPAR gamma, a nuclear receptor that affects gene transcription and has a role in diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cancer. Then for CBDA, it is between 100 and 1,000 times more active on the serotonin 1A receptor as compared to CBD. So may have a role as for treating nausea, for treating anxiety. So these are just a couple of examples. So it was crazy to say that these were inactive. They just weren't active where they were looking.
Can you comment on the available or future methods to assess human endocannabinoid tone?
Ooh, yeah, this has been slow. Ideally, we'd have a Star Trek type device where you waved it over someone and it'd tell you the state of their endocannabinoid system, but we ain't there yet. There can be functional MRIs, PET scanning. Right now, we don't have a good measure that's non-invasive to look at endocannabinoid tone. And again, this can come through different parameters. The simplest thing, although it's invasive, is to look at the cerebrospinal fluid levels of anandamide and 2,8-G. But you can't do that ethically in many countries, in normal people. If we had a way in people of looking at the density of CB1 receptor in the brain, or measuring whether the receptors that are present are in an active or inactive state, or to quantify the levels of the metabolic and catabolic enzymes. So already you see how complicated it is. We can tell some stuff directly by doing serum levels, but even those studies are difficult because the endocannabinoids are highly unstable. And again, they've got to be transported under liquid nitrogen to a specialty lab, and you see how quickly that becomes extremely expensive. So it's a hard thing, but again, a very worthy area of subsequent research.
With over 200 current patents in cannabis compounds filed in the US, how do these patents affect what research is being done and by whom?
Well, for better or worse, companies aren't going to pursue research unless they can profit from it ultimately. So I'm stating that as a fact and not rendering judgment. We're pursuing some patents for the same reason, but they have to be rational. You can't patent cannabis sativa as a species. You can patent a plant if you can demonstrate that it has a biochemical profile that would not normally be found in nature, but for your selective breeding work. So, again, it can have an important benefit, patenting. It also can inhibit other research if somebody's trying to do the same thing you are. May the team with the best lawyers win. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We have 30 more questions and 2 minutes left. And so, we have great demand for these public Q&A webinars, and Ethan and I are trying to do them several times a year so that we can, answer as many questions as possible. But sadly, there is only so much of Ethan and not enough of him to go around, as you can see. And so hosting these webinars is one way that we can share as much information as possible. I do want to remind everyone that this is a fundraiser, and if you haven't had a chance to support the Ethan Russo Trainee Prize, please do so. I also want to take a moment to thank again RxLeaf, CB1 Capital, Plant and Planet Law Firm, and Canurta for their foundational support of this scholarship. I also want to thank our event sponsors today, Society for Cannabis Clinicians, Shaping Fire Podcast, 1906 New Highs, Rooted Law Group, Indocana Health, Merino PR, and Breeders Best. All of you who have registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email from us. We are going to add you to our email list. So if you aren't interested in that, please feel free to opt out. But we'll be providing additional links, including the contribution link. So I thank all of you for being here. Ethan, do you have any final words?
No, I just thank everyone for joining and hope you'll join us again.
All right. Thank you all.